We hear this question a lot, that how does the coronavirus kill people? There was recent news today that 41 people that were admitted to the hospital, 6 of them died and all of them were on ventilators, and they died with something called ARDS, and ARDS is how the coronavirus kills. It's not just the coronavirus but many other viruses, including the influenza virus, that we have every year. How is it that this happens? It's through acute respiratory distress syndrome. You first must understand lung anatomy, and to understand that, let's take an example of a tree. So, a tree has a tree stump, and then it has branches, and then those branches branch, and then further those branches branch, until finally you get to the leaves, and these leaves capture the sun's rays, and plants do photosynthesis with their leaves, and that's how the tree lives. What happens is that this tree and the branches increase the surface area of the leaves on the tree, so that if you were to pluck off all of the leaves, and you were to put them on the ground next to each other, the surface area that is represented by those leaves would be larger than the shadow that is produced by the sun on that tree. It's the same exact thing that happens with your lungs. You've got an airway, and then that airway divides into a right mainstem bronchus, and into a left mainstem bronchus, and then you have a right upper lobe, you have a right middle lobe, right lower lobe, left upper lobe, and you have a left lower lobe, and then these things of course divide into much smaller branches, and instead of leaves at the end of all of these things, what you have is something called an alveoli, which is a tiny little small grape-like structure that the air gets into. The air, of course, has oxygen. There are about 600 million of these alveoli. These are very small, so what happens is deoxygenated blood comes by, and its job is to pick up the oxygen that comes into the alveoli, and then when that oxygen comes in, it oxygenates the blood, and then that blood goes back to the heart and then to the body and all your muscles. That's how you get oxygen, and so you can imagine that this is very thin because the oxygen which comes down here has to diffuse into the bloodstream. So far so good, but what happens? Well, just like when you hit your finger in the door, your finger swells. That's because there's inflammation occurring where you hit your finger in the door, and inflammation causes a leakage of fluids into the tissue space. So what happens here is that you get a viral infection, the virus affects your lungs, and with ARDS the entire lung becomes inflamed. Not just in one area like you would have with pneumonia, or one particular area, for instance on your finger, and it would just stay in one particular finger, in your whole hand wouldn't swell. With ARDS, the entire lung goes crazy with inflammation, and so what happens is that instead of having a nice thin area, inflammation goes everywhere, and you get a large barrier of fluid that goes into the interstitial space. Furthermore, these capillaries start to become leaky, and fluid starts to leak into the alveolar space as well, and this starts to fill up with liquid, proteinaceous liquid that prevents oxygen from getting into the bloodstream, and so instead of having nice oxygenated blood, this blood becomes hypoxic, and you become hypoxic if you have ARDS, and you have a hard time breathing, and that's when you get placed on the ventilator. There's really nothing you can do to speed this up, and there's nothing that you can do to slow it down. You have to be supported on the ventilator so that you're getting enough oxygen, and that the machine can breathe for you until, just like everything else, after you hit your finger in the door, and the swelling goes away, this fluid will eventually go away as well. The key though is keeping you supported during that period, until the fluid goes away, and then once again the oxygen will be able to go back into the system, and you will get oxygen to your tissues. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more video.